Chapter 5. Practice, Practice, and Lip Sync. Growing up, my family always had pets and absolutely loved animals. Over the years, we had dogs, cats, snakes, lizards, fish, frogs, salamanders, and turtles. I remember one time we even talked about getting a monkey. I don't think my mom was really serious, but it was discussed. We had a cat named Tabby, and she was the meanest, craziest cat ever, but we loved her. One afternoon, my mom was upstairs taking a nap, and I heard her screaming at the top of her lungs. I ran to see what had happened and to make sure that she was okay. It turned out, while she was taking a nap, Tabby crawled up next to her and bit her on the face. That was just Tabby. Like I said, she was mean. On March 18th, 1984, the Cassatas gained a new family member, our dog Yukon. Yukon was an Alaskan Malamute puppy and was still small when we picked him up from the breeder. He looked like a tiny ball of fur with giant paws. He sat on my lap and cuddled with me the whole way home, and we bonded right away. From that moment on, he really became not only my dog, but my best friend. Yukon grew pretty fast over the next 6 months and was rapidly approaching 130 pounds. Not only did I have my new best friend to spend every day with, but Yukon also became my wrestling practice partner. Unfortunately, he was more than a match for young Joey. One day while play wrestling, Yukon knocked me over and broke my wrist. Christmas 1984 was great. Not only did I get my new wrestling mats, but I also got the brand new Kiss album called Animalize. By then, my 2 rooms were all set, side by side. I had my drum room and my new wrestling room that I christened Madison Square Room. What else would I call it? Day and night, I would practice my drums to the latest Kiss album and then go to Madison Square Room to practice my wrestling moves with Yukon. Soon enough, my friends and I started our own wrestling league and even made a few homemade championship belts. My favorite championship was the Battle Royal Champion. When 7 or 8 of my friends came over, we would just beat the hell out of each other. There were no pins or no submissions in the Battle Royal match. In our version, a competitor would have to throw his opponent out of the room to eliminate him. Because I was so much bigger than everyone else, I quickly became the undefeated Battle Royal Champion, and also the Heavyweight Champion. Just to be fair, I let some of my other friends hold some of the lesser belts. My good friend since kindergarten, Brian O'Grady, became the Intercontinental Champion, and Scally and another friend, Jimmy Price, became Tag Team Champions. Everything was really starting to take shape. I was getting really good on my drums, and because of my size, it was inevitable that I would become a professional wrestler. The next few years was more of the same. As much as I could, every time wrestling or Kiss was in town, I went to see it live. It got so out of hand that my mother eventually told me I was allowed to go with my friends on our own, so she didn't have to chaperone us. Plus, she would be saving money by not having to buy a ticket for herself. Can you imagine that? I was only 12 years old, and my mother was not only letting me go to Madison Square Garden in Manhattan with my friends, but also to what was known as the Meadowlands, Brendan Byrne Arena in New Jersey. It was actually pretty scary. I don't think my friends ever told their parents that my mom wasn't coming. I can't imagine that they would have been allowed to go. Times Square was a much different place back then, with drug dealers and hookers on every corner. I remember my mom told us, stay close together. Don't talk to anyone, and don't look anyone in the eye. I think we were too young and naive to even think about being scared. All we knew was that we were going to see Kiss or Hulk Hogan. The only problem I was having was that because I was so obsessed with both Kiss and wrestling, that I had to alternate friends every month because no one wanted to go as much as I did. My brother always had a paper route growing up, and I would always try to tag along so I could make a few dollars to spend at Madison Square Garden. By the time 1986 rolled around, heavy metal music had really started to take over. I was not only listening to Kiss, but many new bands as well. Twisted Sister, Rat, Motley Crue, Stryper, Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, Autograph, and many more. Of course, Kiss was still my favorite, and now that all these other bands and the genre itself were becoming mainstream, most of my friends were starting to get into it too. Growing up, I had the greatest group of friends ever. We did everything together. kind of like the Klan in the movie Stand By Me. Or maybe my group was more like the kids in Porky's. The friends I made in grammar school are still my best and closest friends 35 years later. We were a pretty wild group with many different personalities. First, I was the rocker kid who was super big for his age. Growing up, all my friends called me Sata, short for Cassata. Scally was a jock and into basketball. He had very strict parents and was always trying to figure out a way to do things with us without getting into trouble at home. Brian O'Grady, who everyone called OG, came from an Irish family with 4 crazy brothers. He was an absolute nut and had been my great friend since first grade. Phil Parasimo was equally crazy in his own right. Phil would always come over and tell my grandmother how bad I'd been in school that day. In actuality, he was telling her all the bad things he'd done in school that day. Phil was also a compulsive liar, and still is to this day. Jason Pierce might have been clinically insane. He was the kid who would dive off my fireplace and do a belly flop onto the floor, like he was jumping into a swimming pool. Jason's mother was also very strict and obsessed with his schoolwork. Our group hated it because she was constantly calling our parents to discuss study groups or extra classes we could take to get ready for high school. We would always yell at him, "Tell your mom to stop calling our moms!" Brian Daly was the other big kid in our group. Daly was calm, which I never understood because the rest of his family was nuts. He had 5 younger brothers and 1 older sister. 2 of Daly's brothers, after seeing the movie Home Alone, decided to break into their neighbor's house and run the water faucets, just like the Wet Bandits did in the movie. Nuts. Jimmy Price came from a family of older brothers too. He and I always had a contest about who could be absent more days from school in any one given year. At least once a week, I would play sick by shaking the thermometer the opposite way, causing the temperature to go up rather than down. I would call Jimmy that morning to let him know, and then he would cut school and come over to watch TV with me all day. One year, he was absent 53 times, and I totaled 56. We watched a lot of Leave It to Beaver and Gilligan's Island that year. James Myers was the son of our basketball coach. Overall, I think he was probably the quietest of the group. Where most of us had huge personalities, James kind of went with the flow. Rob Gardner was another crazy kid. I guess we were all a little nuts thinking back. Rob and I would call each other every night at 11:30 to watch our favorite show, The Honeymooners, together on the phone. It's still my all-time favorite show. Then there was Bobby Howell. Bobby loved to play Army and climb trees and roofs. It was actually a hobby we called roofing back in Brooklyn. He also loved to skitch, which is when you grab onto the bumper of a car after a good snowfall and then let the car basically drag you down the street. Looking back, skitching was really an insane thing to do. Sort of like skiing without the skis, but attached to an unknowing car. Crazy. Not surprising, Bobby would go on to be a big-time Navy SEAL. Rounding out the main group of closest friends was Damien. We had many more within our group, but these guys were the closest and remained friends our whole lives. Damien was the only one who didn't attend our Catholic school, and he was also a year older than we were. He was never as wild as the others, but he still got into a lot of trouble. Like the time he got beat up with a meat tenderizer. That story always made me laugh. He had marks all over him like chopped meat. A crazy thing we all used to play was a game called Pass Out. The way to play Pass Out was easy. First, one person would hold their breath, and then another person would firmly press their index fingers on either side of that person's neck, essentially cutting off blood flow to their brain. This caused the person to lose consciousness within a few seconds. What a sick game for kids to play. We had no idea how dangerous this really was. All we knew was that it was hilarious when one of us would pass out. Specifically the time our friend Rob passed out and fell face first into Jimmy's dog Spike's pile of dog shit. We must have laughed for 2 years straight. Come to think of it, we still laugh about that story. Just a disclaimer, kids at home, do not try that game. It's very, very dangerous. Okay, moving on. One day during 6th grade, O'Grady came up with an idea of being in the talent show at school. After talking over a few ideas, I suggested we dress as Kiss and play my all-time favorite song, Detroit Rock City. I really said it more as a joke because none of my friends played an instrument, but nobody was laughing. Everyone thought it was a great idea. We originally played with the idea of actually buying instruments and learning to play the song. That was quickly scrapped when we figured out how much all the guitars would cost. We then came up with the idea of lip syncing to the song. At first, I was against it because I could actually play. But I realized soon enough that the only way to perform as Kiss with my best friends and in front of the whole school was lip syncing. We planned to dress up as Kiss in full makeup and costumes and just pretend to be playing our instruments. With only a few months to prepare, we had a lot of work to do. The first task was to choose which version of Detroit Rock City we would do. Knowing I was the biggest Kiss fan in town, my friends left the details to me. I chose the Alive 2 version. To me, that was not only the best version, but it also had the perfect intro for us to come out to. You wanted the best, you got the best. The hottest band in the world, Kiss. I was also in charge of choreography. The problem was, in 1986, we had no access to live footage of Kiss with full makeup to watch and study. Luckily, a few months earlier, Kiss Animalize Live Uncensored had come out on VHS. Of course, I owned the tape, and every day after school we got together at my house to rehearse and study that video. The band consisted of Brian O'Grady as Paul Stanley, Jimmy Price as Ace Frehley, Bobby Howell as Gene Simmons, and of course, me, Joey Cassata, as Peter Criss. Scally took on the role as quasi-manager and the one who watched us practice to make sure everything was perfect. He would also report in on our rival band that was dressing as Motley Crue in the same talent show. We practiced for about a month and then found out we actually had to audition to be part of the show. We weren't worried. We were ready and we were great. Our costumes were all set. Since I had been both Gene and Ace for Halloween a few years earlier, those costumes were easy. Even though I was 6 and 7 years old at the time, they would fit my friends because I was about the size of an 11-year-old back then. Brian's mom came up with a pretty cool looking outfit for him to wear, and I wore one of my mom's old one-piece jumpsuits as Peter Criss. It was perfect, with the zipper going up the front that I could leave open just like Peter's outfit during Destroyer. My mom, who had done my makeup for the past Halloween costumes, was going to do all of our makeup. The audition was set for after school on March 10th, 1986. The plan was to rush to my house after school and start getting ready. Around this time, my mom had just started a new job working at Boop's video store, 2 blocks from my house. The night before the audition, she found out that she had to go to work that day and wouldn't be able to apply our makeup for the audition. This is a disaster! How could 4 11-year-olds possibly apply their own makeup? We had no idea what we were going to do, but we had no choice. After school, Jimmy O'Grady and I ran to my house to get ready. Bobby said his mom was going to apply his makeup. After an hour, we were finally ready. We looked terrible. The makeup was all smeared where black was running into white and our lips and half of our chins were covered in red lipstick. Then Bobby walked in. As bad as we looked, he looked even more ridiculous. To draw Gene Simmons' makeup design, his mom had put his hands on his face and then traced them. So he basically had 2 giant black handprints on his face. This actually cheered us up. It was only the audition and we knew we would do great. On the way to school, we had to pass my mom's video store. She came out to give us a big good luck yell as we ran by, which gave us a little extra bit of confidence that we needed. Once at the audition, we only got to play for a few seconds. It turned out that the audition was just a formality. They wanted to make sure everyone entering the talent show was serious and had something prepared. For the next few weeks, we rehearsed nonstop, day and night. Even though this was just a lip-sync performance, it was my first real performance in front of a live audience. It meant the world to me, and I wasn't going to mess it up. I had to make sure we were perfect, and we were. That was until Bobby, our Gene Simmons, wasn't allowed to perform with us anymore. My friends and I used to play this horrible prank game when we were kids, Ring and Run. Ours, though, was more of the Brooklyn version, which we called Kick and Run. Most people in Brooklyn at that time had screen doors in front of their regular wooden front doors. Screen doors were pretty flimsy and made out of a thin piece of metal. The way the game was played was we would pick a house with a good screen door. One member of the group would walk up to it, ring the bell, and then kick the screen door as hard as he could. In essence, he totally annihilated the screen door. Then we would all run as fast as we could. For some reason, we thought it was a lot of fun. But on the night when it was Bobby's turn, he picked a house a few doors down from where our friend Jimmy, our Ace Frehley, lived. Again, another disclaimer, kids. Do not try this game. It is horrible. We were terrible kids. Anyway, back to the story. All went according to plan. Bobby went up, rang, kicked, and we all ran. We thought nothing of it until the next day when at rehearsal. Jimmy informed us that his neighbor saw Bobby do it, which naturally didn't sit well with Bobby's parents once informed about what their son had done. Not only was Bobby punished for kicking in the door, but he was also not allowed to participate in the talent show. We were only a few days away from the performance and we had no Gene Simmons. Luckily, our friend James Myers stepped up and said he would do it. Finally, the day of the show arrived and I was super excited, but there was still a lot to do. Even though this was just a lip-sync performance, it gave me my first look into what it took to put on a rock show. First things first, I had to pack up all of my drums. I'd never broken down my drum kit before and I had no idea where to even begin. I actually didn't even know it could be broken down. My brother and his friend Jimmy Whalen took apart the drums as best as they could and started to load them into my friend's parents' car. I didn't have cases or anything. Needless to say, the drums got pretty scratched on the way to the talent show, but that wasn't the biggest problem. Once we got there and unloaded, and while I was putting the drums back together, I realized I couldn't mount the toms to the bass drum. The arms seemed broken. Looking back, I believe my brother just lost one of the wing nuts and maybe a spring, but I was sure at the time that he had completely broken my drums. I didn't have time to be pissed or anything because we had to set up and start getting ready. Luckily, I wasn't really hitting the drums that night, so I just propped the toms on the bass drum, which caused even more scratches. While we were lining up our instruments, the point person for the talent show came over to ask, "What are you guys doing? Why aren't you setting up on the stage like everyone else?" I answered, "We aren't going to use the stage to perform on." I set up my drums in front of the stage on the gym floor. Because the whole school would be watching from just the bleacher seats on either side of the gym floor, I decided to use the gigantic gym floor as our stage, so we could be closer to the audience. Even then, I knew we had to stand out from everyone else. I didn't want to be lumped in with all of the other lame acts on the same stage. I wanted to be different. I initially came up with this idea from watching the aforementioned Kiss Animalize video. They opened that show with the same song we were doing, Detroit Rock City. They came out on a platform over the drums to start during the "You wanted the best, you got the best" speech. Then, drummer Eric Carr jumped down from the platform and the remaining members started the opening riffs while standing above the drummer. It was a very cool visual that I wanted to try to recreate using the stage as the platform above the drums. Once our gear was in place, we moved backstage to put the makeup on. This time my mom was there to help. An hour later, we were ready and looked amazing. Everyone backstage was raving about how great our makeup and costumes were. I thought to myself, we can't be stopped. This talent show is ours. While waiting our turn, our rival band, Motley Crue, was about to start. The band consisted of a few of our classmates. They were performing the song, "Smoking in the Boys' Room." They looked awful. Bad costumes, bad wigs. Once they started their performance, it was clear that they barely even knew the song. We were trying to be respectful, but 11 and 12-year-olds' idea of that is much different than adults. We were openly laughing from offstage, at least until the middle drum a cappella chorus section of the song started. The band began to raise their hands in the air and signal for the audience to clap along with them to the beat. It worked like a charm. The grammar school crowd obliged and began a huge audience participation clap that was roaring loud. Our laughter came to an abrupt halt. We were suddenly a little worried. Even though we were clearly more prepared and looked way better, this crowd participation part was a big hit, and we were unsure if we could follow it or if we had anything to match it. Once the Motley Crue band finished, we took the stage. This was it, my first real performance. Well, sort of. playing the drums in front of a live audience. Before we even started the song, we got a pretty good reaction because of how good we looked. But I knew it wasn't enough. We took our places at the edge of the stage above my drum set, which sat waiting below. We raised our hands high in unison and heard, "You wanted the best? You got the best. The hottest band in the world? Kiss!" My jump down from the stage was modeled on Eric Carr's antics in the Animalize video, and I took my place behind the drum set. The chugging riff of Detroit Rock City had started, and the show had begun. We were perfect. Everything we rehearsed was going according to plan, and we were completely in sync. Even our new addition, James, was great on bass. Using the gym floor was working out well, too, keeping us much closer to the crowd than all of the other acts, which I think we used to our advantage. The only problem was that the crowd wasn't really doing anything. I think they were enjoying our performance, but because we didn't have a big crowd participation part, we didn't get the reaction that Motley Crue had received. That was until the bridge. Our Paul Stanley, Brian O'Grady, took control. He went completely off script and away from everything we had rehearsed. Once he was free from the mic, the bridge had no vocals, of course, he proceeded to go over to one of the most hated and feared teachers in all of the school, our 6th grade math teacher, Mrs. Cook. Mrs. Cook had one lazy eye and was notorious for yelling and pointing at someone in class while simultaneously looking at another because of her lazy eye. This always confused not only the person she was really targeting, but also the person whom her lazy eye was now focused on. This resulted in both parties getting into even more trouble. OG proceeded to approach the evil Mrs. Cook, and once within striking distance, he started sticking out his tongue like Gene Simmons, even though he was playing Paul Stanley. Mrs. Cook was appalled and clearly angry, and so was I. Being a diehard Kiss fan, I knew that Paul Stanley would never stick out his tongue like Gene. It was blasphemy. I wanted an authentic Kiss performance, and this wasn't it. I was already preparing my lecture in my head when all of a sudden, the audience completely erupted with laughter and cheering. They all knew Mrs. Cook and her reputation as one of the meanest teachers in the school. If they didn't personally experience one of her lazy eye pointing while looking at a different person outbursts, then they certainly heard about it from other students. The crowd absolutely loved that she was having a tongue wagged in her face. After a few moments, and to everyone's shock, Mrs. Cook seemed to start enjoying it. She was smiling and even started to stick her tongue out. The crowd noise was twice, if not 3 times louder than the crowd participation that the Motley Crue band had gotten. OG had saved the day. There was no winner crowned for the talent show, but we knew, like everyone else there, that we had won. I learned a lot from that first live performance. First, never let your brother and his friends move your drums. Second, and this is a lesson I've kept with me all throughout the years, is that you should never be so over-prepared that you aren't able to change things on the fly to play to the wants and needs of a particular audience on any given night. I've played with many musicians over the years who would always want to over-rehearse. Yes, there is such a thing. Then, when it came time for the show, they weren't able to jam or change the set list because they were so set in their ways that they couldn't improvise. I believe that improvisation, in all forms of performance art, is undervalued and underappreciated. And this little performance at my 6th grade talent show taught me a lot about improv.